Welcome to a special edition of Live from the Blue Seats. I'm your host, Rob, joined by Dave, and this is a crossover edition of the pod as we also welcome in Nick and Chris from 30 on Broadway, talking blue shirts, kind of our pod brothers, pod cousins. I don't know what you want to call it, but really glad to have those guys here as well as we record on the eve of free agency. A lot of news beginning to surface. The Rangers are going to do something, we think. We'll see. We don't really know what the plan is, but that's probably a lot of what we're going to talk about here today as we get you set for the first day of free agency in the NHL and for the New York Rangers. Once again, I'm Rob with Dave from Live from the Blue Seats and Nick and Chris from 30 on Broadway. Guys, I don't know how to, in what order you want to do it, but say hi and tell everyone how you're doing.
I'll start just because I got, in some states, brothers and cousins are the same thing. So,
ooh, okay.
This is not Tennessee.
Alabama.
You're the only 10 I see.
We definitely have listeners in all these states. Let's be very cognizant of the fact that there are Ranger fans all over this country in all 50 states.
It's still a good joke to have.
It is. It's a great one.
I have a good cousin.
I'm patting myself on the back. But anyway, to answer the question, I'm good. I had a good birthday weekend with the girls. And now enjoying a 3.5 day work week before a 3-day weekend. So things are good.
Well, I'm jealous that you have a 3.5 day work week and then you get to actually enjoy the holiday. I don't. This is like, dude, this is my hell week. This is
the
my
life you chose.
Yeah,
this is the life we lead, the life we choose.
That's fair, but still, this is my absolute hell this week. This is my least favorite week of the year. But no, I thought it was funny that Rob was talking about the plan for free agency, like that. We don't know the plan, which is funny because I actually think our general manager doesn't know his plan, have a plan. Like I don't think there's an A, B, C, D of for Chris Jury. I am very scared. I'm nervous. I don't like this. I'm going into my busiest week, of the year for my business, and plus I have to worry that my GM is an absolute moron. So I'm on pins and needles. But I love talking to you guys, so that makes it better.
This is your escape.
Yeah.
Talking to us is your escape.
When the Rangers are your escape, it's a problem. But let's talk about the lives we've chosen.
Talking about Drury as Nick's escape. That's Jesus. Good Lord.
Hey, and look,
I do have
because it used to be I could have talked about Kreider, but now I don't have to do that anymore, so it's good.
Yeah, so you got what you wished for. That's sometimes you don't. Yeah. I do have an interesting story about cousins.
Oh God.
Because why not just
tell it?
No, this is not something that you would think would be a Northeast kind of thing, but Connecticut is now making it illegal to marry your first cousin.
It's actually surprisingly legal in a lot of states. It's still weird, but it's surprisingly legal.
I was very surprised to see that, especially for a state in the Northeast and as blue as Connecticut is. But anyways. So yeah, just on the cousins thing. But I used to say I'm living the dream. To circle back to how I'm doing, I used to say at my old job, when living in a life of misery, when anybody would ask like how you doing, I would say, "Oh, I'm living the dream," because it's incredibly facetious. But right now, I could say paying attention to what's going on with the Rangers or what's not going on is kind of like living the dream. So that's kind of where I am right now on a Ranger scale.
So marrying your cousin is legal in New York too. I'm Googling this, by the way.
That is strange.
It's also legal in California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Mexico, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, and Virginia.
Most of the country, it seems like.
Half the country. Yeah.
That is interesting.
But
for your first cousin, that is very strange.
It is not legal in the state of Delaware, so well done,
because
guys.
There's barely anybody in Delaware.
Yeah, it is a criminal offense. It's a criminal offense in Texas, Oklahoma, both Dakotas, and Nevada.
See, I'm surprised that Texas would have it as a criminal offense. That's just that. See, that I never would have got that.
But in Oklahoma, it is not frowned upon.
Well, you know why Texas will never fall into the ocean? Because Oklahoma sucks. You get it?
Okay.
That was a bad joke. But
anyway, we're literally starting off with cousin marriage as our first topic.
A full 5 minutes so far.
Full 5 minutes of this.
So let's circle back to the existence or lack thereof of a plan. So the Rangers have not really done much of anything. Now, look, they traded Chris Kreider. Everyone knew that was coming to clear cap space. There's been a lot of rumblings about Keandre Miller being traded. There's been a lot of rumblings about Vlad Gavrikov preferring the Rangers. Maybe he doesn't prefer the Rangers. He might be using the Rangers for leverage to get the best deal possible out of LA. That's my vote, at least in that situation. But let's go back to the crux of the matter, which is, and I think this is the way to frame the question, and whoever wants to jump in and answer it first. Is this what Chris Drury expected? And now look, this, I think, again, assumes that there is some sort of plan here. Is this what Chris Drury expected, or do we think he is a little bit caught off guard by the lack of, say, interest in Keandre Miller? And, you know, I just think, and, you know, the fact that he chose to trade the 12th pick, it kind of seems like they have done everything the opposite of what they thought, what we thought they were going to do. So was this, do you guys think this was the plan, or is this kind of, Drury not being ready for this summer?
I honestly, I thought giving the 12th to Pittsburgh this year, I always thought that was going to be the case. I personally always thought that was the best move. That was something that if it was me, if I was in that seat, I would have done, just because I don't think the Rangers are, look, I'm going to be flat out honest. Barring some kind of miracle, the New York Rangers are not winning the Stanley Cup in 2025, 2026. So it's better, in my opinion, that they save that pick and hold it themselves for Gavin McKenna, rather than, if they really are bad and bottom out, that they give the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are actively trying to be terrible, another kick at the can at getting a generational talent in Gavin McKenna. So for one, I actually agreed with Drury on that. But everything else, I mean, I don't mind extending Edstrom. I don't mind extending Rempe. But for me, my first order of business this summer would have been extending Will Cooley. Like, the fact that tomorrow is July 1st and Cooley doesn't have an extension is borderline professional malpractice for me with Drury. Because we've been hearing, you know, with the cap rising, this is going to be the summer of offer sheets. And I know we've heard that like the last 3 summers, but with the cap now set in stone to jump, you know, in 3 years to $113 million, you could actually see a team planning for the future and trying to make a move and getting a young talent like Cooley under lock and key for a great deal for the next 5 or 6 years. So the fact that our general manager has been asleep at the wheel with that has been utterly atrocious. My other big gripe is how he's negotiated in the media with this Keandre Miller situation. You know, early in his tenure, this kind of stuff wouldn't have happened, and all of a sudden now information is just flooding out of the garden. And the fact that everything with Key has been so public, Drury's losing all of his negotiating power. So I just think these 2 things for me are just huge misses by the GM.
Dave, what are your thoughts?
Was this the plan? I am going to hedge a bit, because I think part of the plan involves waiting until after bonuses are paid on July 1st and after Carson Soucy's full no trade becomes a modified no trade on July 1st. Remember, the Derek Brassard, Mika Zibanejad swap was actually agreed upon 2 weeks before it was announced, but Ottawa wanted the Rangers to pay Brassard signing bonus. Same thing applies. I have no confirmation on this. This is just what I'm thinking. This is thinking out loud. Panarin's do a ridiculous bonus. Zibanejad's do a ridiculous bonus. Soucy has his no trade ending. I think Trocheck has a bonus coming. Laugh has a bonus coming. All these guys with these contracts to free up space have bonuses coming. And it means a lot to budget teams with a significantly rising cap over the next 3-4 years to have, say, an $11 million cap hit for, $1.5 million of real money. I think that's what Panarin's is. Zibanejad would be $8.5 million for the next 5 years, whatever, what would amount to $6 million a year. That matters to a lot of these teams. And I think Drury is waiting for that to make a big move. And then we'll see the Cooley extension. And then we'll see things like Soucy moved. We'll see Keandre Miller moved. Things like that.
So you think, just to reiterate, Dave, you do think that there are still major moves coming?
I know one is happening in the next 24 hours, but I don't know if that's considered major. So, for example, Zibanejad due $9 million in signing bonuses on July 1st. That's huge. Panarin with 1 year left, a $7 million bonus is due. Panarin, his base salary is $1 million. $11.6 million cap hit for $1 million real cash. Some team would want that if the Rangers want to move on from him. It's a big if.
Right. Okay, wait. So, Chris, let me get your thoughts on the plan, and then Dave, I'll circle back because it sounds like you're hinting at breaking a little bit of news here, but I want to hear Chris's thoughts on what he thinks is going on here, and if this is all going according to plan, or if, Chris Drury is the Joker and not really a guy with a plan.
Yeah, I mean, I've had very little faith in Drury. Nick could even say this. I was one of those that was pounding my chest saying Drury should have been fired last offseason. And a part of that was hysteria that was created by the New York Post and whatever with, not managing the cap properly or not doing things, what other teams have been able to do very well and very successfully, i.e. Tampa Bay or Vegas. So I haven't had a lot of faith in Drury. Things going back to him in Hartford when he was the assistant GM or GM there. So my thoughts on Drury are kind of, I don't know if there is a plan, so to speak, or if it's just trying to throw whatever he can at the wall and seeing if it sticks. Like he's done two big things I think he's done really well, maybe three. Outside of the negotiations and the summer treating of Goodrow and Trouba, getting those contracts off the book, getting the money off the books, fantastic. Moving Kreider, getting Kreider's money off the books, fantastic. But he's also followed that up with now, handcuffing with a Carson Soucy or, basically eliminating all that cap space that we wouldn't even be remotely having any of these conversations if he doesn't make those deals. Maybe jumping the gun a little bit too soon on Borgen, who I have really liked, but maybe jumping the gun a bit on the extension there. So it's always like Drury seems to do something well. Like first trade deadline, swung for the fences and thought it was looking pretty great. And then it's like he follows it up with 3 or 4 bad things. And so it's kind of like, I don't really know. And I don't really have, I have really no faith.
Yeah, well, I think I'm kind of in that camp as well. And I'm of the mind, if you look at around the league at the way other teams do business, of course, there's the handful that do it really well. Florida obviously comes to mind, the way they were able to kind of like build a decent sort of homegrown base, add a star player via a huge trade. Now they can attract all kinds of free agents and guys, through trades. sure, the no state income tax thing helps, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Tampa Bay and Vegas, two teams you guys mentioned. I think Dallas, has obviously built a really strong, sustainable contender. It's funny. The Rangers, I think, should be, and I think Drury probably wants to operate in that Vegas mold, right? And Tampa to a certain extent as well, right? Where it's kind of like a fuck them picks. We can get star players. We can like deal with the bad money later. I think he wants to do that, which kind of like leads to this scattershot results. But he also hasn't really been able to execute because he's stuck by a core that I think everybody knew wasn't going to get it done. Now, to your point, Chris, he got two of those, bigger contracts off the books pretty quickly, even if he didn't, handle it great, or, the backlash was worse than he could have expected. I don't necessarily blame him for that, but there does not seem to be sort of a coherent or cohesive approach, especially to team building. And I think, I think the Will Borgen and Carson Soucy thing is exactly it, where, he kind of is like, all right, I got those big contracts off the books, and he felt this need to sort of like fill in the gap right away. And it's like, I go back to what you said before, Nick, about, could this Ranger team be a lottery team next year as currently constituted? Absolutely. But it didn't need to be that way. And what they should have done is realize that last year was a lost cause by the middle of December. And they could have just not filled those books. Let Zach Jones play 60 games, bring Matthew Robertson up, let him play 50 games. There's no reason to sign Will Borgen to a contract extension. There's no reason to trade for Carson Soucy. Like, roll with your younger guys, bring up Othman, give Perreault his cup of coffee, and you end up where you end up. And then you go into this summer with a massive amount of cap space. I will say the one thing I do think they are doing here is I think they do have an eye on next summer. I think they do want to keep a certain amount of money available. And I know Panarin's contract comes off the books, whether that's this season via trade or next season. But obviously with McDavid and Eichel potentially hitting free agency, there's a few other huge names out there. Look, if Connor McDavid hits the market, the Rangers have to be in position to get the meeting and make a pitch. So, and I frankly think he needs to become the first $20 million a year hockey player. And I think any team that wants him needs to be willing to present that number to him. I think it's absurd that there are no $20 million hockey players. At this rate, there's going to be a $20 million WNBA player before there's a $20 million NHL player. But that's besides the point. No disrespect to women's basketball, by the way, in saying that. But it just speaks to the way that, how stagnant the salaries have been in the NHL for the last almost 30 years. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think we can all agree that this has been a really poor 6 months for the general manager. I don't necessarily think the previous 2 or 3 years were bad. I think they were mixed. I think they were mostly good. The team was in two out of the 3 conference finals in the seasons prior, right? So he was doing something right, I would argue. I don't think that was all smoke and mirrors. So yeah, listen, I do think that there is a lot of work to be done. Now, Dave, you were alluding to something you think is coming in the next 24 hours. So by the time folks listen to this, we're recording on Monday night around 9 p.m. Eastern time. We're keeping our eye on news as it continues to trickle in as we do this. You'll hear this on July 1st, hours hopefully before free agency opens. But what do you have in your Rolodex there, Dave, that's telling you that something's coming?
Now, prefacing this with everything is subject to change, but I have now confirmed this with 3 sources. One is a big person that said I'm on the right track with this, and what I've heard is most likely happening. My source from Detroit has not replied to me, which is very telling. And yes, for the doubters, I've been doing this shit for 17 years. I obviously know people at this point.
You've got some sources.
I have the sauces. Keandre Miller will be traded to the Detroit Red Wings at some point. I want to say tomorrow. I am unsure what the holdup is. The return from Detroit for Keandre Miller will include defenseman Albert Johansson, whom the Rangers were trying to get in the Jacob Trouba fiasco last summer. Another Chris Drury blinders example. My understanding is the Rangers are trying to get a 2026 first rounder. And I am of the belief that won't happen, and they'll settle for a 2027 first rounder.
So you think they're going to get an NHL player and so you're hearing, sorry, not you think.
Albert Johansson is 61. He's got 61 games, so he's not really an NHL player. So,
well, yes, but he was was he a first round pick?
Oh God, I don't think so.
I think he was a second or a third rounder.
Let me pull this up. Albert Johansson, second round pick 2019. He is 24, will be 25 in January. 6 foot, 168 pounds is definitely not right. Just recently signed a 2-year contract extension with Detroit, obviously to get the thing moving. $1.125 million cap hit. Left defense.
Right. Okay, so he slots in. I mean, but he becomes a Rangers roster player, obviously.
Yes, he does.
But he's more of he's a body, but the real prize is a first round pick, is what you're saying.
I believe the real prize is the first round pick. Obviously, it's a net. So technically speaking, they're they're losing $1 million in cap space because K'Andre Miller isn't signed yet. Technicality, but
if that roster flexibility to be able to, because everyone's saying it, and I think we all believe. I think Gavrikov's going to be a Ranger, barring something really weird happening.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know. It doesn't. I think they might not be able to offer the most money. Now, if he really wants to come here, then fine. And that means they shouldn't overpay. And I think like $8 million would be an overpay. I know he had a really good year last year, but also that was on a really good defensive team, a really well-structured team. His numbers in Columbus were pretty hideous. And again, I know those were bad teams, so context is needed always in these discussions, but he'd be coming to a team that's very much in transition. And it's like, okay, this guy has one really good season on a very good team, 5-on-5 team. And we're expecting him to be the stabilizing force, I guess that would be the purpose of giving him a massive contract. So again, my hope is that fine, he's a good player, but I don't want to overpay him because this franchise has made this exact move. How many times? You need 2 hands and 2 feet to count the amount of times, it seems. And it never works. It always just ends up handicapping them. And we're going to be doing this exact podcast in 4 years talking about the albatross contract that is the Gavrikov deal. So like, why are we doing this again?
And they also do this with Miller. They're letting a young guy go to sign a veteran. They do this all the time. This is dating back to the 90s at this point.
Oh God, this is tale as old as time.
But I look at it with Gavrikov, if you give him $8 million, I'm actually okay giving him $8 million, because when you look at it, and this is, I was like thinking about this earlier today, with the cap going up the way it's going up, $8 million for Vlad Gavrikov in 2 years is going to be like $5.5-6 million right now. Like, you're looking at maybe 7.5% of your salary cap.
But that's also relative.
Right, but
because then you have to look at all the other, like the Lafrenières, if they're still around, and the other guys where your contracts are boosting up higher.
Right. You're going to give Will Cooley a bridge deal, and then his actual extension is going to need to be $9 million as opposed to paying him 6.5 now or 5.5 now. This is the thing. They always seem to be chasing this.
I do agree with Nick. Like, we do need another strong body on defense. Like, we don't have that. And Gavrikov is a very attractive option, but to me, it's really only attractive if all the other pieces fall in line on the roster. Exactly. Which kind of leads us to what we're always doing every year. It seems like we're waiting for those pieces to take the next step. And we thought we got it with Lafreniere 2 years ago, Hedl and the sense, and then it seems like just it imploded this past season.
Remember, Ivan Provorov just got $8.5 million a year.
That's insane. I mean, that is just talk about an absolutely bizarre, crazy contract. I mean, the reaction around the league is one of like everybody's completely stunned that that's where they ended up.
crazy.
But I also look at it. He also can be more of an offensive threat though than Gavrikov. Like I feel
you end up paying for points. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in this market, with where the cap is going, $8 million for a guy like Gavrikov is actually fair market value, especially when in the and I definitely get the apprehension that he's kind of been a mixed bag throughout his career because he went from being on a really bad team with some bad metrics to a really good team with some outstanding metrics. But I also look at it, I did watch a lot of LA King games this year. And the one thing that I noticed, especially when Drew Doughty was out early in the year, Gavrikov was the guy. He was playing all those big, heavy minutes. And out in the West, you're playing a lot of those bigger, heavier, way heavier forechecking kind of teams that are going to look to pin you deep and beat you up. And he was never out of place. He actually was probably the best king in those situations. So that's a guy, honestly, that I'm willing to take a gamble on.
I mean, I think my opinion on that is, and I agree with you in the sense that he's a good player. I just think that, again, at the top of the show, we're talking about like, this could be a lottery team. So then like, what are the Rangers doing exactly? Because to me, Gavrikov's the kind of guy you go out and you spend big on when he's the final piece, right? When you're like, and this move would have made all the sense in the world 2 years ago, right? You're coming off, or 3 years ago now, you're coming off that great playoff run, the 22 run I'm talking about. You run out of steam against Tampa in the East Finals, but you're a young team. You feel really good about all your young players. The kid line showed out in the playoffs. Panarin's an MVP candidate. Zibanejad was your best player once he got through the first 3 or 4 games of that Penguin series. Like Kreider had a 52 goal. Like you were like, that's it. We're ready to go. We're ready to take 3 good shots at a Stanley Cup here. And that's when you go get a guy like Gavrikov. But here's the thing. They already had Jacob Trouba on the roster occupying that slot of the supposed big shutdown defenseman. He was never that. He was always miscast in that role. And that's why he ultimately failed here. So I just think the timing is bad with Gavrikov, and I would rather save the money, be a little bit more shrewd with a couple of mid-level blue line signings, leave some space open, and use this as more of like hey, look, we know our best case scenario is we're a wild card team. So let's see if the young guys and, let's see how the new leadership core, take shape with JT Miller and Trocheck and those guys. Let's see if Fox can step into a leadership role and really become like the alpha presence that a guy making his level of money needs to be, because he really has not been that, even though he's a great defenseman. He's a great player. You can tell he's really not, a leader that much. I think he started to become that second half of last year, but like, you got to find out about what you already have and then go out and add your final pieces. And oh, by the way, again, Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel could be sitting there in free agency next year, but not if you commit big dollars to Gavrikov and potentially a few other guys to fill out the roster. Cause then you're like, all right, well, we got the Panarin money coming off the books, but we got to make 2 more trades to clear an $18 or $20 million slot for Connor McDavid. So I don't know. I just think the timing's wrong on Gavrikov personally.
I agree with you. I've never been for signing Gavrikov, especially now that we're seeing this contract may wind up being 8 years, $8 million. Not $8 million would be a steal at this rate. It's just, why are we repeating the same thing over and over again? I'm so sick of it. We have to break the cycle of this crap. Let the team retool on the fly, punt next year, and maybe you're lucky you get McKenna, but if not, you still got most likely Eichel coming over, which is another 30-year-old player with an injury history that I'm not really fond of, but we'll get to that another time.
He's been great, though. I
wouldn't know,
he's been great since he recovered. But he's been great. He's been one of the 4 best players in the league.
I know.
4 best centers in the league.
I know. Everything points to me that everything points that I should be happy with that. There's still something nagging at me that I'm not going to be overly
it's the Rangers.
thrilled with.
The Rangers have been doing this their entire. They've been doing it.
Maybe it's that. Maybe it's that.
You're a 41-year-old Ranger fan. That's what it is.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm 41 years old.
Oh, I'm not the oldest anymore.
I'm a 40-year-old Ranger fan. Yeah, I'm right there.
Oh, I'm not even the second oldest. I'm almost there.
Wow, that means I'm actually the baby of the group. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's very true.
Wait. I'm the grandpa of this fucking group? Seriously?
Yes.
I'm closing in on the big 4-0.
Wow.
It's not that bad.
JL was onto something then.
But I will say I feel like I'm 60, so maybe I am the oldest.
I don't know. I see the problem is, and I think this is where it all comes back to the easiest explanation. It is the easiest explanation, and it's also the most annoying at the same time. A lot of these things that we keep talking about, that we keep coming back to, it all goes back to ownership. Yep. And Drury is a direct line of ownership where the mandate is Dolan wants to win, but if you actually have a plan to be successful for the long term, and I think that's where the hodgepodge of we're going to be young, but we're going to have our foot in both camps. And it's like, no, like you have to pick one. It's one or the other. It's not one from column A and one from column B. It's like, set a chart, map it out, say, okay, look, we're looking at 2 years of suffering. All right, we'll get through 2 years. We got money coming off the books, and then we're going to make a run at it. Like the whole notion, and this is what I hate, because like everybody looking at next summer's free agency is like, back in 2018 when Tavares was going to be a free agent. Oh, it's okay. We can ride through it, and we'll sign John Tavares in the summer. Like, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. Like, totally. I personally, I don't believe that McDavid's making it to market. I don't think that's going to happen. I also don't think Eichel's going to make it to market. I think Eichel's staying in Vegas.
Well, they just gave Mitch Marner how much money, so we'll see about that.
They did.
Well, Pietrangelo is done for his career, so they're going to help
I can't imagine he comes back from this injury. That's insane.
But it's just like, I think it like what the Rangers are trying to do by appeasing both sides of the coin. And again, I think it goes back to Drury kind of wanted to follow the Gorton-Davidson approach to a certain extent, but Dolan gave him a mandate of, hey, I'm not making enough money. Stop screwing around and get me a contender. And then it becomes, okay, well, then we have to rush development, and we have to, we have to service too many masters. And so at the end of it all, of what I'm trying to say is James Dolan will always be the issue. Until you have ownership that understands you're not going to win anything without building a future first, which requires suffering, you're not going to win.
Yeah, and I think that does speak to, I mean, you kind of said this, but just to reiterate, like, a lot of what Drury has done has been like in a vacuum the right thing to do. And like, even look, he overpaid wildly for Barclay Goodrow, but there was a recognition that the Rangers needed that type of veteran presence and that style of player. So he went out and got a guy that he really believed in. Even the Reeves signing to a certain extent was like, all right, we're going to change the attitude of the team. And that's why he did that. And it's always been about execution with him. And he's always rushing that execution as opposed to the actual idea. I think his broad ideas are correct. Again, back to the jettisoning of Trouba and Goodrow. Like, he knew he had to clear money off the books and start turning the roster over, but it's how he executes that seems to be the issue. So, any other thoughts on Gavrikov? And I guess, how else do we think the Rangers are going to approach free agency here? Because, I have this, sneaking suspicion that they're going to sign more players than we think. And there is going to be a little bit of like how are they going to do this? Because, you got to make the math work ultimately. Although, Dave, as you always point out, when you write about this stuff, you can be 10% over the cap until, is it opening night or is it training camp? It's one of those two.
It's like the Monday of the first week of the season or something like that.
So there might very well be like hey, I'm going to bring in whoever I can afford, and then we'll make decisions, in September and early October. There's some names out there that are very Ranger names to me. Nick Bjugstad is one of them. Christian Dvorak is another one, right? There is this kind of like, hey, if Zibanejad's playing wing, they need a third line center. That's not Johnny Brodzinski. It's not Juuso Parssinen. Sam Carrick, obviously best served on the fourth line. I just feel like there's those types of like, oh, that guy, right? And then, that's actually a very Ranger thing to do. I could see a few of those happening either, today as you listen to this on July 1st or within the first 2 days of free agency where everyone's kind of like, okay, this isn't a horrible move, but like, how is this all fitting together? So do you guys have any other gut feelings going into free agency about the types of players? Oh, one other that caught my eye is Nick Cousins. Nick Cousins is almost like made in a lab to join this Ranger team. I know he stinks and I would hate it, but that seems like such a Ranger thing to do.
I was going to say, I want Jonathan Drouin.
See, there's another one. Yeah. But I feel like he's going to get a multi-year deal.
I was shocked when I looked up Drouin's stats earlier today, and I saw that he was practically a point per game player.
Yeah, he's all offense, no defense.
And he was playing with McKinnon, and he got power play time.
Yep.
He is, right. But I think if you sign Jonathan Drouin, he's got speed. He can back the defense off. And if you put him on the top line with Miller and Zibanejad, he doesn't really need to be defensively responsible on that line.
That's true, because Zibanejad will cover for him, yeah.
Yep. Like, I was thinking about that today, and I was like, that's kind of like a sneaky, sexy little fit. And, I mean, look, he's not going to be Chris Kreider and do all the things that Kreider did, but I think on that line, if you're getting the best out of him, there's no reason to me with the type of player that he is that he can't put up 60 to 65 points on that line. Easy.
The thing is, if Zibanejad's playing wing, who is your third line center?
I like Brodzinski in that line. So nope. I gave Chris
Mr. Not My 3C. Mr. Not My 3C would be your third line center.
I know.
As far as hell ain't going to be Juuso Parssinen. That's just asking for trouble.
Or here's my other thought process. Drury would have to get creative, which hasn't seemed to be his strong suit. But Jared McCann.
He played for Sullivan, right?
He did in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
I am a big Jared McCann guy.
Is he available?
I mean, Seattle has so many centers; they have to start moving them out eventually. Like, and I mean, if you let's say you get a pick for Keandre Miller, like Dave is saying, you do a little bit of gymnastics here, and you'd have to trim some fat elsewhere. But McCann would be a steal, and then your center depth: Miller, Trocheck, McCann.
McCann or McBain?
You'd have one more year left at $5 million.
McCann. You're talking Jared McCann, or are you talking Jack McBain?
No, I'm talking Jared McCann.
He's available?
No.
He's got 1 year left. He's basically insinuating like Seattle needs to suck.
Okay, I missed that.
Seattle needs to embrace the suck and just be honest and say, look, we're not good. Ron Francis was a shit GM and set us up for failure. So let's embrace the failure for one more year, sell off as many good players as possible to try and get as many lottery tickets at Gavin McKenna, and let's turn this thing around from 2026 and beyond.
Yeah. I am not sold on that only because if Vincent Trocheck is your second line center, this team is not built to win a cup. The same way Brian Boyle couldn't be your third line center 10, 12 years ago. Rob, I've been beating this to death on every single fucking podcast.
Well, and I agree with you. Yeah.
That's a hill I die on. And my target has been Marco Rossi. I know it's not going to happen. You get him for all offense. You don't worry about him because, he's 5'9", but he plays like Zuccarello. So you don't need to worry about that. But Vincent Trocheck is not a second-line center, the same way Jacob Trouba is not a shutdown defenseman. You need Trocheck on your third line. And that is a hill I die on. That is a well-constructed team down the middle if Trocheck's your third-line center. But you got to get somebody who can score at second-line center. Who's their second-line center? If it's Zibanejad, great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but, okay. In this world for Rossi, what are we giving up for Rossi?
At this point, I have no idea because I thought Rossi would command a decent price, and apparently nobody wants anybody under 6'8" in this league anymore. Thank you, Florida.
I mean, my best proposal would probably be Othman, whatever pick, if you get a 27 first round pick for Key, you give him either a 26 or a 27 first round pick, and Matthew Robertson or Adam Sikora.
Robertson doesn't have much. So they want a center. They want an NHL center. And the only guy that makes sense is Zibanejad in that realm. And in theory, it could work. But, they are very adamant about not waiving their no-move clause. So they meaning Zibanejad and family.
Yeah, that's fine. We have a slightly used Yusuf Parson that we can give them.
Could you imagine if it's just Yusuf Parson for Marco Rossi? The trade is 1-for-1.
I mean,
I'd lose my mind.
Or do some sort of luck like that, right?
I just don't understand why Minnesota wants to move on from him. Anyway, it just doesn't really make much sense to me. But
I think it is.
They don't think he can play in the playoffs, which makes no sense. He's a 60-point, 23-year-old center who plays like Zuccarello. Come on.
I was going to say, has Bill Guerin not seen Braden Point? Dude is not the big, did you not watch Anthony Cirelli? These are not big guys, and they were some of the best players for Tampa Bay's 2 Cups.
It's crazy.
The Minnesota Wild, the Minnesota Wild are built to just make the playoffs. That's been their identity forever.
That's true.
I mean, that's them. I never expect Minnesota Wild to go past the first or second round. It's not because of Marco Rossi.
No, but I do think that, look, Bill Guerin, Chris Drury, they're both USA hockey guys. I think there is more of an emphasis on size than there should be.
Oh, for sure.
With those 2 guys. And I just think that, Nick, you make such a great point. And yet, even Brian Boyle, who I really like and would love to have him on this show, or, he's a great dude. And I agree with him. I want to say 90% of the time. He does great work on the New York Post podcast and very unvarnished, not over complimentary of the Rangers at all. He's very critical. He had enough of the whining and moaning and complaining this year and called them out for it. But, I listened to the episode that they recorded a couple of weeks ago, and he was kind of alluding to, what makes Florida great and, kind of why he thinks they were on the precipice of winning back-to-back cups. And he was basically emphasizing size. And he was like, the same thing wins in the league every year, no matter how much the game changes, blah, blah. And he kept alluding to size and physicality. And I just think, look, Brian himself he's 6'7". He was a big player who I think kept his job for a long time because of his size, even after he was kind of a little bit past his prime. And I just think that is such a narrow, misguided way of analyzing the sport when there are so many players who are not the biggest that are on winning teams. I mean, Brad Marchand is not a big guy. He just got a 6-year deal at age 37, which I think is ridiculous. But hey, if anyone's earned it, he has, and Florida will live with the consequences of that, at least for a few years, because I don't think that's a good contract at all. But look, I mean, you do not need to have an army of 6'4", 220-pound hockey players to win a Stanley Cup. And I think, to your point, Dave, yes, you want, in theory, an offensive second line center and a matchup third line center that you can strategically put out on the ice in the matchups that are most advantageous to you. And the Rangers have not had that matchup flexibility because they have not quite had the depth right down the middle. Philip Hedl just he wasn't good enough to be a 2C. Trocheck fit so well with Panarin that he was kind of the de facto 2C. And ultimately that was one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that the Rangers couldn't get over the hump. And they knew that. So they're trying to address it. But yeah, I mean, the only other thought I had on this is, I'm saying this right now, and it's not really free agency related, but I'm on the record now. I don't think Gabe Perreault is going to make the team out of camp, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think he's going to need some time in the AHL. I don't think it's the worst idea to see if he can cut it at center in the American Hockey League, because he's such a creative player. He is a pure playmaker. Why not put him in the middle of the ice and see if that works out? Because that could be your long-term 2C solution. It could already be on your roster. And I think it's an experiment worth trying. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I think that's way too forward thinking of you for this organization.
Yeah, probably.
I will be almost disappointed if Gabe Perreault is on the roster. I think he needs to go to Hartford. I think he needs to. I think they need to do this right for once. And it goes back to
the opposite of what you did with Keandre Miller.
Yeah, please. I mean, let him start down there. Let him. I didn't. There wasn't anything really bad with his game when he was here. There wasn't anything but nothing stood out to where, oh, this kid looks like he's ready.
Correct.
And I think if you're going to do anything, if you're going to do like the center experiment or anything, do it now. Yes. Do it now. Try it out. See what happens.
Right. And you can't do that.
I don't think there's any reason.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any reason that Perreault should be on this roster, barring massive injury or he comes out of the gate in Hartford and is basically like Igor, where he forces the Rangers. That's the only way I think he should be up on the roster. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's how it should be. But to kind of circle back onto your point, Rob, about size and how everybody kind of jumps to the 6'4", big player, big hulking guy, the Brian Boyles and whatnot. You know, you kind of said it perfect. Brad Marchand, 5'9", Sam Bennett, 6'1". He was like the biggest guy out there. Mm-hmm. I think Messier kind of said it best on one of the broadcasts where he kept referencing playing big. You need guys that step up and play big. They might not be the biggest. They may not, again, Brad Marchand, 5'9", but they're willing to do everything that in the essence of playing up, hitting above your weight class, essentially.
Matt Zuccarello did that when he was with the Rangers.
Yeah, Matt Zuccarello,
ridiculous passes.
Yeah.
And then
couldn't push him off the puck either. He's the smallest guy on the ice, and you could not push him off the puck.
Well, that's because he's just skated through everybody's legs.
And, JT Miller does that. JT Miller brings that to his game. JT Miller was bringing that out of Mika.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what the Rangers need. They needed to get away, as great as Panarin is. Panarin has had 1-2 postseason series where you're like, oh, yeah, here we go. This is Panarin from the Columbus-Tampa Bay series. And then it just tails off and it falls back. You need those other guys that are going to go into the trenches and get you through and be willing to do what your star players either can't or aren't going to do if you're going to have any success. And that's a big reason why. I mean, Florida has just bought into that identity of their Bulldogs, and you're not going to push us around. We're going to bully you up and down the ice, and a lot of people aren't going to like it, but clearly it works. I mean, they're back-to-back Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah, there's something different in the water in Florida. No, I mean, I look
it's
at
the no state tax.
Dude, well, no, see, like when I look at size and like when you look at size in terms of team building, for me, it's not in the forward group. It's on the blue line. And I would love to have a bunch of Adam Foxes on my blue line, but you need that mix and that combination of those bigger guys who have a little bit of skill, but they also have that bite to their game. And I mean, I think, that's where, to me, Aaron Ekblad is the perfect prototype of that. Ekblad has superb skill, like through the roof kind of skill, but he also, you are not pushing him around. Victor Hedman, same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think that's where you have guys who, 6'2", maybe 6'3", they take away time and space and they're willing to commit defensively. That's where I think for me, where size is most important, in the modern NHL now. You need those guys who are a little bit bigger, like Ekblad, like Seth Jones, who can skate, but also defend really well. To me, this is not like the 1980s. Like, I don't need size like that. I need, I need guys who can actually move and just, play the position.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, certainly, look, that helps, take away time and space and just eat up ice. And that's what's infuriating about the Keandre Miller thing. And I think that is, look, I would say that if that ultimately does not work out here, and if he is traded, and if we've seen the last of him in a Ranger uniform, this isn't quite the same as like the other Ranger flameouts where you could easily point to the organization and say like they didn't do right by this guy. Like I actually think Keandre Miller was on a really good trajectory for his first couple of years, and I think for some reason he just hasn't put it all together. And I don't necessarily blame the Rangers for that at all. I just think that he hasn't quite grasped the position. And I do think that could be a systems thing. And it could be the constant changing of coaches. I mean, look, he played for 3 coaches in 4 years, right? He played for Quinn. Did he play for Quinn? I think he did his first year.
Yes, he did. Quinn brought him up, was the one that started him in the NHL.
Quinn, Gallant, and then Laviolette. And it's like, young players need a little bit more stability than that. So, I've been saying this to Dave on our shows the last few weeks. Like, I'd love to see him under Mike Sullivan. I think he could flourish under Sullivan in this system. Not that I know a lot of particulars, but just simplifying the game for him. Look, if this trade falls through or if nothing happens with him, I don't think a 1-year prove it deal is the worst idea. I would play him with Adam Fox, and I would just let that ride for 40 or 50 games, because you might have that exact, again, same thing with Perreault. And look, that's a little bit more of a reach, moving a wing to center, and that's a little bit more of a prayer and an experiment. But this is just like, you have a 6'4", just complete athletic marvel on skates on your roster with a 43-point season under his belt already, and you're just going to let that walk. You're going to trade that for Albert Johansson? Like, man, that's a tough sell. It's a tough sell.
I think I am just so beaten to death by what Drury is doing that I don't have any more energy left to get riled up on basically getting shipping off Keandre Miller for peanuts. It is what it is at this point to me, but I don't know. There are some rumblings about some off-ice issues with Keandre Miller. I've been trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know if there's any truth to off-ice issues with him. But on the surface, like you said, Rob, moving, he's 6'5", by the way.
No, right. I shorted him an inch. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to give him that inch.
I was just saying, an inch matters, man.
Well, I mean, look at his best though. I mean, think about him at his best. Like, he could
him at
be,
his best is very good.
It's very good. It's one of those prototypical Stanley Cup level shutdown defensemen. It just isn't. We don't see it consistently enough, it's part of it, and that it has to be acknowledged.
Here's my issue with Key, and this has been my biggest issue with him probably since we brought him up. He tries to play a style that doesn't suit him. He plays very high risk, high danger, but he doesn't have that skill set to pull it off. He tries to play like Adam Fox and make those flashy kind of plays, and he has skill, but he's not. And the problem is his defensive game is not polished enough to make the kind of decisions that he looks to make with the puck to cover him when it fails. And that's why the problem with him is every time he seemingly makes a mistake, it ends up in our net. And that's why, like, I prefer a guy like Braden Schneider who knows who he is. He makes mistakes. He doesn't have a beautiful looking stat chart, but the difference is the mistakes he makes you can live with because they don't end up in goals against. So you can survive Braden Schneider mistakes. Every time Miller seemingly makes a mistake, it ends up in our net. And that's where I just don't know if you can coach that out of him at this point. Like, I think we had a chance when you first brought him up that his rookie season, you saw the decision-making wasn't there. And you go, okay, let's send him down. Let's let him, we saw what he can be, what he flashed us, but here's the rough parts of his game. Let's send him down to polish him off. And they didn't do it. They rushed him along. overlooked a lot of red flags defensively with his game, and now this is the end product where I think they baked in too many mistakes into the pie, and now you can't go back and correct it.
Another tale as old as time, the Rangers screwing up development of a prospect.
For sure. And I think that's fair. I think it's I think there are holes in his game that probably could have been mitigated by 4 or 6 months in the AHL, a season, or half of a season in the AHL. So, but again, that ship has sailed, and we will see what happens. All right, so guys, we're approaching an hour here. Want to start wrapping it up? Let's go around the table and do predictions. So let's just all give our sort of like what we think the Rangers are going to do in free agency here. Again, this doesn't get us to a complete roster. You don't need to throw in a trade or anything like that. But if you had to say, all right, where do the Rangers stand at the end of the first wave or the second wave of free agency in a couple of days here? Where will they be? So I don't know who wants to start first, but let's do some predictions before we wrap up.
Oh, I think it's foregone. I think Gavrikov is in at 6 years, and I'm going to say 6 years at like 7.75.
Okay,
somewhere in that neighborhood. And then I think Drury looks for that third line checking center, and maybe another depth defensive piece somewhere. Hey, for shits and giggles, because I'm all for chaos. Let's bring Calvin DeHaan back on a 1-year deal.
I'm all for that. I think he's
I'm all for that.
He did say player. He was open.
Yes.
Yeah.
He should be. And the Rangers should be open to him because he's a very good defenseman. Yeah. I cannot believe that whatever. I'm not going to talk about that right now.
Stole my thunder, Nick. Damn you.
Insane.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is, I don't know about Gavrikov. I think there's too much. I think it's too much of there's big names out there. The Rangers are interested. It's the same thing kind of with the offer sheets. I don't put a whole lot of stock into it. I mean, the hysteria that was starting to form over is Matt Rempe going to get an offer sheet, I thought was ludicrous. I'm not overly concerned. I think Cooley will be a Ranger. I don't see a problem there. Supposedly, the belief is that they might be around $1 million or $1.5 million off in numbers right now, but it doesn't sound like it's anything that's like insurmountable. But I kind of fall more into I think you're going to see the typical Drury depth pickup. Like he seems to love those guys and making those moves, whether it works out or not remains to be seen. But my thing was going to say, if they don't do a Gavrikov, I would not be surprised if you see Calvin DeHaan. I literally wrote that name down, and I wouldn't be surprised. Funny. And they should, because he brought a really solid stabilizing force to the back end for those 2 games. Looked a little bit out of place in Game 3, but I mean the whole team did. And then Laviolette I don't know what the hell happened there. But I really wouldn't be surprised if Calvin DeHaan is brought in, and then you see more of Robertson getting a look as kind of those two as the tandem depth D guys, and we see what we have. I'm more concerned, to be honest. I'm more concerned about what our third line is going to look like, because as of right now, I think our third line could be potentially atrocious, and that's a concern, especially down the middle. And I don't know how he addresses that unless he gets really creative and does a thing like Nick was saying earlier with picking up a Jonathan Drouin and shuffling things around, and that could potentially make the dynamic line. But again, we're sitting here wondering if all cylinders are going to fire, and then you're sitting here going, okay, this is a potentially really good roster, but you're having to have everything firing off again like we had 2 years ago, and I don't know if that can happen again.
All right, Dave.
So, predictions. I think Mika Zibanejad is going to play center this coming season, which eliminates the need for a center. I think he will wind up in a sheltered offense-only role as the 2C. I think the Rangers will sign Jonathan Drouin to play there, and I do think you guys are right. Perreault will start in the AHL. I am intrigued by Anthony Mantha.
That was another name. That was the other one that came up.
I am intrigued by Anthony Mantha.
I bet you they are too, because of, size.
Yep. And so Mantha, not this past season because he didn't play enough. Last season, his player card, so 23-24, his player card on Evolving Hockey, which is, again, just one piece of the puzzle, was 93 across the board. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, he's a year removed. It'll be an amazing buy low, low risk kind of contract for him. I think they sign him. I don't think they make any major trades aside from Keandre Miller, probably for Johansson and the 2027 first-round pick, like I said. Jones is gone. I don't know what the hell they're doing on the left side. I guess it's going to be Gavrikov because there's nothing else. Right. So that leaves you with what? Gavrikov, Fox, Susie Borgen, Schneider, and one of Vakanainen and Johansson, which is just a brutal defense. And then somebody to play seventh defense, I guess Matthew Robertson.
Yeah, or maybe somebody else from like a Victor Mancini pops out at camp. They might be looking for one of those too. Somebody you just don't expect.
Yeah. Could be that. Could be Florida needs to shed about $500,000 of cap space. Maybe Nico Mikkola finds his way back into the conversation because, size. And I don't know.
I mean,
nothing makes me angrier
nothing makes me angrier than that.
They should just give us Gustav Forsling, and we'll call it even.
Oh, that would be fine. Yeah, well,
I'm okay with Forsling. I'm not okay with Nico Mikkola. Everybody's obsessed with Mikkola in the comments. Like, this is a perfect situation for Mikkola where he doesn't have to be an actual defenseman. That just came out wrong, but you knew what I meant. Like, Florida is so good, and they all buy into the system. All the forwards have bought into the system. Even Brad Marchand bought into the system. Mikkola is not that good, but I have a feeling, again, size, $2.5 million. Luckily, it's only a year. But I see the Rangers surrendering something stupid for him.
And that would be another tale as old as players that have left and excel. I was actually just mentioning this, not to completely sabotage or go off rail. I was mentioning this with Nick before. Marian Gaborik is another perfect example. Goes off to LA, gets kind of sheltered and excels. Where here with the Rangers, it was just like, oh, here's Gaborik, dump everything on him.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, very much so. There's been a lack of sort of structure and identity, really, because that also informs the type of players you target. Whereas, again, the Rangers have always gone about this in a very scattershot way, right? They're like, oh, well, we'll get the biggest star, or we'll get the largest defenseman because we need a big guy now to, do that crease clearing presence. It's just, and look, I think I said this on our show a couple weeks ago. Their best period of sustained success started with John Tortorella and then carried through the first few years of Alain Vigneault, because Tortorella had that team playing a very identifiable style of hockey that pretty much everybody bought into, right? And the guys that didn't buy into it were shipped out, and they were replaced with guys, or they filled in those spots with guys that would play that style and would play it effectively. So, look, ultimately, I guess they probably are putting themselves in a position where they almost have to get Gavrikov, which drives me nuts because it just seems like they should not be in a year where they're like backed into a corner and they like need to make that type of splash in free agency. And like I said, I do just the names that come to mind, as you sort of peruse the list of available free agents. Nick Bjugstad just screams Ranger, not a bad player at all, and could be productive, although he's 33 years old. But as a 3C, again, Nick Cousins is out there. Sean Corrali is out there. He's another guy who, feels like a Mike Sullivan type player. Mason Appleton's a free agent. These are like the Tanner Jeannot is a free agent, which scares the hell out of me. Yeah. I just feel like we're going to get a couple of those, like guys in here on 1 or 2 year deals, $1.5 million a year. Those types of like bottom six, like bring an edge type of players.
I do like Appleton.
Appleton's not a bad shout if you want to like bring in some, because the other thing is, look too, if you were to chart out the Rangers lineup right now, it would be very dependent on Offman, Berard, and potentially Perreault playing, as well as Rempe and Edstrom. So you're talking about giving major minutes across your, basically your bottom 3 lines to guys with, Rempe's the most experienced out of all those players. I don't think Mike Sullivan wants a team that's constituted like that. I know Chris Drury doesn't want a team that's constituted like that. They're going to bring in some veteran wingers. Like they're going to do some bargain bin shopping. And Appleton could probably be had for something in that, 2 years, 1.75 per type of range. Not a big goal scorer, but kind of a do-it-all Swiss Army knife type of forward. Could see something like that happening. And yeah, I mean, but I am intrigued by Mantha, and I wouldn't mind that. And I do think the Rangers might feel like they need that type of punch as well towards the top of the lineup, whether it's Drouin or Mantha. But again, there's a lot of questions to be answered about how they're going to make this all work cap wise, because somehow after the shit show of the season they had last year, they don't have a lot of cap space to work with, even though they should. So we'll see how it plays out.
Mantha there's so.
He's exactly like Kreider. He's basically like a poor man's Kreider, and you already didn't like Kreider.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's the thing. It's like for all the stuff I used to say about Kreider, like Anthony Mantha is that, but worse.
Yeah, he's like an unpolished, immature Kreider.
Yeah, I just like that would drive me up an absolute wall. Like I would. There's I would be livid. I would.
Oh, you know what? Now I want it. Now I want it.
Oh.
Well, look, I mean, to your point, Dave, he's got good underlying numbers, and look, he was good for 20 goals a year when he was healthy. So,
yep. Yeah, health is the issue with him.
Yeah.
I just want to see Nick lose his mind, though. It's just fun at this point.
Oh, dude, it would cause like an old school rant of mine. Like it would be like the level of anger and toxicity that would come out of me is just ungodly.
And it's your worst week of the year.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It would make everything, I
thought Memorial Day was your worst week of your year.
No, Memorial Day is not bad. July 4th is the worst because so many assholes from out of town who don't know how to drive, like all the Pennsylvania assholes come here, and it just makes me want to kick somebody.
Are we about to really end this on a Nick rant about this? Because
I would rather,
Nick, I would rather you rant about. Give me one rant about the Rangers. Anything.
I mean, perfect one. Keandre Miller. As much as I like Miller and I like his upside and the potential of what he could have been, everybody in this fan base adores him, even though he has the same problems that a guy like Keith Yandle had. But this fan base hated Keith Yandle, couldn't wait to run him out of town, wanted no part of him around because he was an offensive defenseman who played no defense. At least when we had Yandle, we had a guy who could quarterback a power play, who was a proven 60-point defenseman in his prime. Miller has shown none of that. He had one good 40-point season, and yet this fan base wants to hold on to him and pamper him and cradle him and love him and tell him that it's okay for him to be a fucknut.
He's homegrown.
Dude, I'm telling you. But, like, this is my biggest issue. Like, I cannot stand the
Here we go.
Moving goalpost. Like, I mean, it was the same thing with Stepan. Everybody loved Derek Stepan. Dude never had a 60-point season. They overpaid him. He got paid because he rode Rick Nash's coattails, and he got a big money deal out of it. Never put up 60 points, but it was okay for him to absolutely suck. Mika Zibanejad scores 40 goals a season, puts up damn near 90 points as a Ranger, puts up some of the greatest numbers in Rangers history, is moving his way up the all-time ranks. But no, we have to trade that guy because that guy's not good. But we had to hold on for dear life for Derek Stepan.
Who else? Who else?
Oh,
who's your best comparison with Mika and
I just like everything with this fan base. Like so much of this fan base gets under my nerve, like under my skin now, because we're gonna change things because I like this guy because we drafted this guy, we traded for this guy. He's a better player, but it doesn't suit what I want to say. So this guy sucks. It's like no. Like I'm so.
We gotta be more like the Yankees.
Like no. I mean that's the problem. We are too much like the Yankees are.
Everybody wants to run Volpe out of town. He's home.
Like I'm so glad that Captain Cancer is gone. Like I really am. You know, I have to let it out of me. I do. Chris Kreider was poison, and he's gone now. And he's gone now.
I don't agree with you, but I'm not getting into this shit now. We're well over an hour.
It is cleansing for the soul that he is gone.
I don't agree with you.
We will win a Stanley Cup without Chris Kreider, and it will prove that I was right.
Better.
And he was the problem.
Die.
Wow. Yeah. Shocking revelation there, Nick.
You know, hey, whatever.
All right, so listen. This has been a lot of fun. We will see what happens. We're heading into what is always an interesting day for the Rangers. They rarely sit free agency out. I don't think we can expect them to do that this year. And yeah, listen, keep it locked here live from the Blue Seats. We will do a show later in the week in kind of our usual Friday slot. 30 on Broadway, guys. What do you have coming up? Anything else you want to promote before we sign off here?
Yeah, so we are we're playing a little game on the 30 on Broadway Instagram, and would love for all of you to join in. Starting July 1st, so I guess when this recording comes out, we're going to every Tuesday in July, we're going to have a little contest on our Instagram where it's basically going to be Guess That Ranger. So you're going to have a photo, you got to guess the Ranger, and that will get you an entry into winning an exclusive 30 on Broadway shirt that is not available anywhere. So check out our Instagram. It's at 30 on Broadway.
I will say though, the design that you came up with is absolutely awesome for the shirt.
Nice.
I think a lot of people are gonna like it when they see it, but it's a pretty sick design. I will say Chris has a lot of talent artistically. It's a hidden talent, but this was
no talent involved. But anyways,
we could see this on the Instagram.
It is on our Instagram, 30 on Broadway. The contest, the way to play the contest will start on our Instagram story, but you can go check out the Instagram and you will see the post that is up right now. And you will have to view the Instagram story July 1st. And it'll be every Tuesday in July. There's going to be a different player that you will have to guess the player in our Instagram. And that gets you an entry into winning the shirt, the shirt design. There's only going to be like 4 or 5 of these shirts made. So nice. It's exclusive. Fancy limited edition, specially curated. All those fancy words that gets everybody excited.
All right, so here's what we'll do. We will link to the 30 on Broadway Instagram. All the contest rules and such will be there. And yeah, we encourage everybody to check that out. When you hear this podcast, the contest will be live. So head over to the 30 on Broadway on Instagram. Keep up with Nick and Chris, who do a great, regular Rangers podcast. And like I said, Live from the Blue Seats will be back later this week as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. Let's keep cool heads during the first wave of free agency here. And we'll talk to you soon.